From MTN News, this is Face the State.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Jackie Coffin.
And I'm Augusta McDonald. We are 2 weeks into the Montana legislative session, and with more than 4,400 bill draft requests filed, we're seeing a lot of movement on proposed laws.
Yeah, that's right, Augusta. A few of the bill drafts that are getting a lot of attention and discussion this week are related to mental health, the criminal justice system, and addiction recovery houses.
And a lot of those legislative priorities came up in this week's roundtable discussion with Governor Greg Gianforte and city leaders in Billings, where crime has spiked in the past 2 years. Speaking with city and county leaders at a roundtable on Wednesday, the governor said most of Billings' crime and safety issues can be boiled down to a mental health crisis and drug use epidemic. There are bills in front of the legislature this session addressing these underlying problems, including legislation to establish a pre-trial diversion pilot program. That would funnel nonviolent felony drug offenders right into treatment programs. In the governor's proposed budget this session, he seeks to increase money for the Heart Fund by 50%. The Heart Fund is a $25 million annual investment in community behavioral health and substance use treatment. The governor's budget also permanently funds 8 drug courts across Montana.
The reason I bring that up in relation to crime is law enforcement tells us 90% of the crime we're seeing is drug or mental health related. Our local jails are filled up with people with mental health issues.
Governor Gianforte also signed a proclamation recognizing January as Human Trafficking Awareness Month in Montana. This as lawmakers in Helena began considering a major overhaul to the state's human trafficking laws.
The House Judiciary Committee held the first hearing Tuesday on House Bill 112, sponsored by Representative Jody Etchert of Billings. It would treat crimes like promotion of prostitution and involuntary servitude under the same umbrella as sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Montana Attorney General Austin Knudsen says that means tougher sentences.
We have got to let the message be known to those in Montana who would prey on these innocent victims that if you do this and we catch you, you are not going to get a slap on the wrist, you're not going to get a fine and a couple days in jail. You're going to do some hard time, and this is going to be a felony.
Knudsen says his office's trafficking investigations have increased more than 800% since 2015. He doesn't believe the crime is happening more often. Rather, law enforcement is getting better at identifying it.
And State Senator Barry Usher from Billings is hoping other lawmakers will vote for a bill he's sponsoring to increase regulations on sober living homes. That legislation went through its first committee hearing this week. Supporters say it's designed to better define what can be considered a sober living home and make sure they're run for the right reasons. We spoke with the owner of a sober living home in Billings who does support the bill, but she admits she's one of the few operators who does.
They're not trying to harm anybody. They're just trying to make sure that we provide safe, stable housing. You know, people don't get to sober living on a winning streak, and so we realized that for the foundation to grow, it had to be bigger than us.
No vote was held on the bill this week. Billings hosts the majority of sober living homes in Montana.
While Montana abortion law takes center stage Thursday, state regulators holding a hearing on a new rule change, which would require additional steps to get abortion procedures covered by Medicaid. MTN's Jonathan Ambarian has more on how it could impact patients and providers.
The Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services says additional documentation is needed to ensure that the state's Medicaid program is only covering abortions that are medically necessary. But some advocates say that would be an unnecessary barrier to accessing an abortion. DPHHS has proposed a change to state rules, requiring prior authorization before Medicaid pays for abortion services. The federal government prohibits Medicaid funding for abortions, except in cases of rape, incest, and when the mother's life is endangered. But Montana, using state funds, covers any abortion that a physician determines to be medically necessary. DPHHS leaders say a review concluded Medicaid-funded abortion claims should come with more supporting information. The proposed rule would require including medical history, a physical examination, and documentation on the diagnosis. In a statement to MTN, DPHHS Director Charlie Brereton said, quote, DPHHS must ensure that abortions paid for by Montana taxpayers under Medicaid are truly medically necessary in accordance with the law. We welcome comment on the proposed rule and look forward to further protecting the integrity of our Medicaid program through its finalization and implementation. But opponents of the change are expressing concern about the impact to those seeking an abortion.
It's functionally an abortion ban for low-income families. If individuals have private health insurance, they don't have to go through these hoops.
Aileen Gleiser, a communications consultant with Blue Mountain Clinic, says about half of the clinic's abortion patients are covered by Medicaid. Gleiser is also a board member for the Susan Wickland Fund, which provides financial assistance for women seeking an abortion. She said the rule changes would particularly impact those who live a long way from the nearest abortion provider.
Abortions are a time-sensitive service, so the mandatory prior authorization is particularly harmful. It would delay abortions later in pregnancy. It would make them more expensive, more invasive, require a longer recovery. And it would also fully eliminate telehealth, as I've mentioned.
DPHHS will hold a public hearing on the proposed rule change Thursday at 1 p.m. through remote conferencing. The department will accept public comment on the proposed change through January 20th. In Helena, Jonathan Amberian, MTN News.
So, Jackie, a lot of the issues that we're talking about tie into Montana's mental health crisis. And coming up after this break, we're hearing from a panel of experts on how the state can tackle this problem.
We'll also talk more about abortion in the hot seat as Face the State continues next.
And with that, let's go ahead and pull in our guests talking about behavioral issues. We have Mike Shavers, chairperson of the Behavioral Health Alliance of Montana, joining us. Thank you for being here, Mike. And we also have Dr. Lauren Wilson. She is the president of the Montana chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics to talk about youth mental health, also a big topic right now. So thank you both for being here. I'm going to go ahead and open up your audio.
Hello, thank you.
Thanks, Augusta. Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Maybe right off the top, Mike, can you talk a little bit about what Jackie was referring to in terms of behavioral health needs and, that intersects with crime and in certain areas, but talk in general about what your organization does and some of the issues that you're hoping to see addressed during this legislative session.
Sure. So the Behavioral Health Alliance of Montana is a group of behavioral health providers really spanning the spectrum of age from kids to adults, mental health, substance abuse, some tribal partners out there really working to meet the needs of Montanans. And, we felt this problem and growing problem acutely within our members and our organization, that as the needs have gone up, our abilities to provide those services have actually gone down through inflation, through wage growth, through the inability to attract employees, and because of the poor reimbursement. Montana's been significantly behind in the reimbursement really across the spectrum of care. Not just, I'm a children's mental health provider myself with Yellowstone Boys and Girls Ranch, but across that spectrum. And what we see when that happens is that the people who are struggling with addiction and mental health issues get pushed into other systems that aren't designed to work with them and end up with worse outcomes for them, whether it be the homeless population or jails. It's just continuing to be an issue that it's time to address. It's time to take care of.
And I guess what are some of are you seeing any certain pieces of legislation or areas where funding could be applied specifically? You mentioned a little bit Medicaid reimbursements. Are providers having a difficult time accommodating patients that don't have, insurance? Or I guess where are you seeing kind of gaps in where people cannot access care and pay for it reasonably?
Yeah, one of the biggest areas that we've seen is in with Medicaid reimbursements. During the last legislative session, there was a rate study that was funded to have an independent group come into the state of Montana, Guidehouse, and take a look at what's the actual cost of care for providing these services. They looked at the cost of care back in 2019 So before the pandemic, and what they found was that Montana was significantly underfunding care. As we moved forward, since 2019, we know that the costs have gone up even more. And what we've seen in results of that is not only are people not getting services like they need because we can't expand, we can't provide those services, but we've actually seen a shrinkage of services. The nursing homes get a lot of press for closing out there, and they deserve that. I mean, that's a problem that needs to be recognized. But the fact is, there have been a large number of mental health providers that have had to shut down services, group homes for kids out there, mental health services that have either contracted because of the inability to hire and keep and maintain staff because of those low reimbursement rates, or complete elimination of those services. So it's been huge, and the impact has been felt. Right now in Montana, for kids that need residential care services, half of those kids that need those services get sent out of state. As far away, Georgia, North Carolina, really with worse outcomes. Not that all those agencies are doing a bad job, but when you take a child that far away from their family, you just cannot maintain that connection and cannot reunify them well. So it's a significant issue that Montana has to address. We're sending our kids and our family members out of state, and we're sending our tax dollars out of state at the same time. So it's time to take a look at that. That's really being addressed. The governor's budget does address that some, but it takes a look at that Guidehouse rate study and funds only a small portion of it. About, all told, once you do the math, about a third of what Guidehouse said it costs to provide that level of care back in 2019. It's really our request that that study be fully funded, that and across the system of care, that those rates be funded at a cost that allows the services to be provided. Although it seems like a bigger ticket item now, it actually saves money down the road, and we'll keep that money in Montana and keep our kids and keep our families together in Montana.
Dr. Wilson, I see you agreeing a little bit with what Mike is talking about. Maybe tell us what you're seeing as a pediatrician in your office and with the kids that you're working with in terms of, being able to send them to appropriate levels of care, and maybe also talk a little bit about what happens when kids at a younger age don't get those early interventions in terms of the cost that Mike is referring to going up down the road.
Sure. I agree with everything Mike was saying. I think that, for a long time, we've been underfunding our system, paying providers of mental health services less than the cost of care, and filling those gaps with grants and with donations, and things that are not reliable from year to year and don't allow us to build capacity in the system. And we see that at every level. What Mike's talking about is residential facilities, which are for kids who really have complex needs, but even frontline interventions in the schools. We've seen the Comprehensive School and Community Treatment Program, or CSCT program, within schools be weakened. Last legislative session, it was moved, actually, the supervision was moved between agencies. And a lot of schools weren't able to cope with the different administrative burdens that happened there and actually ended their programs. And those are kind of frontline programs that keep kids who might need that little bit of extra assistance to stay in a regular classroom in the classrooms so that they can function, so they can benefit from being at school with a peer group. And those programs really kind of helped us to get to kids before things got really bad. And so we see with mental health care that the more you pay attention to what you can do preventatively to strengthen families and communities and support kids where they're at, the less money you have to spend down the line with more complex needs. And that's why we were happy to see this rate study happen. We would like it to be fully funded. And also we were happy to see in the governor's budget some investment in a child tax credit, because that has been shown to improve the health of children as well, not having to live in poverty.
Okay, and I think a talking point that's fallen off of the radar, I think a little bit, is the impact of COVID and isolation on kids. And I think from what I understand, there's going to be, years of kind of getting kids that went through COVID, different ages, both with learning, but also with, behavioral issues and maturity and mental health and everything that went into what kids went through during those couple of years. Talk a little bit about the outstanding issues in terms of addressing needs from that era and how severe, I guess, what are you seeing kids need right now?
Sure. I think it's important to know that prior to COVID, Montana was still always in the top 3 for suicide rates and had some significant needs. And that we've seen rates of depression and anxiety in children gradually going up for a decade or more. COVID was a traumatic experience for a lot of people. There was isolation, there was change to routine, there was anxiety. A lot of children lost caregivers, and that left them in a really difficult spot. And, all of that kind of upended people's worlds. We hear a lot about learning loss, but I think just the change in routine for kids was hard. So, we definitely see the one thing I saw in my practice that actually noticeably increased were the number of people with eating disorders. And that's maybe multifactorial, thinking about time on social media, time on screens. But, we're still sorting out, what is at the root of kind of the increased behavioral health needs that we've been seeing for some time.
So we're talking about fully funding to the recommendation level of this Guidehouse study. What are some other things that kind of emerged to you guys that you're following, at least, that are either red flags for you as legislation or things you support, or what else are we missing this session?
Dr. Wilson brought up some great points that I also agree with completely. The early intervention in the CSCT program, hopefully with better early intervention and sustainable programs, we could need less out-of-home care for our kids. There's a bill pending right now to move the oversight of CSCT away back out of OPI and into DPHHS, where it really needs to be. The OPI staff have done their best, but really they're not experts in Medicaid. It was asking them to speak a foreign language. And that's the first step. We'd like to see some other changes with that down the road, but just getting that oversight back into the Department of Public Health and Human Services really makes sense, and we're in full support of that. And I think there's lots of challenges. I will say that I've seen unprecedented collaboration as well with the Department of Health and Human Services. They've been transparent and collaborative. I'm pleased that the governor has recognized this issue. I'd like him to fund it fully, the rate study, but they've recognized it. And we have legislators that I think are listening and engaged in ways that I haven't seen in the past. And so I'd like to continue to encourage that as well. I think there's some good and hopeful signs out there in this current legislative process.
Yeah, I think I would agree. Again, I see a lot of ideas and a lot of thought being put into how to address mental health needs. There was a bill that was heard today, for example, to make it easier for people coming from out of state to get licenses if they're in the behavioral health field, so that they can practice more quickly and more easily. And things like that are good ideas. I do want to also draw attention to other things that the pediatricians are following, though. At the same time that we're looking at our mental health system, there are also a number of bills that do discriminate against LGBTQ youth who are at higher risk of having mental health issues, partly due to the discrimination or lack of support in their communities at times. So we are watching those closely and hope that those bills won't go anywhere, because I think that would, just add to some of the needs that we're seeing right now.
Sorry, just unmuting myself to keep scanner traffic out of here. But I kind of want to pick your brains on, since both of you specialize with youth populations. At this roundtable the other day, I heard a figure that's billing specific, but I think is a trend we see across the state. Our youth homelessness increased, the need for services increased 54% in the last year, which is a huge amount here. And I know that other communities struggle with this too.
of course, I'm the journalistic fly on the wall of this conversation, so I can't ask questions during the roundtable. But I wanted to know, what are some of the drivers that are common? Why, what, and I know it's kind of per the conversation we were talking about out of the pandemic, a lot of those struggles. But are there any other, points that are kind of driving up our youth homelessness rates that you guys are familiar with or identifying that we haven't really talked about yet?
I think there's a lot to that, and we recognize that we have a housing crisis first and foremost. So the cost of housing goes into that. The fact that, the cost of basic goods has gone up more than wages, and families are kind of struggling to make ends meet. And so we really support, using some of the money that we have in our state surplus to support families with young kids, whether that's food security, housing aid, child tax credit. We're looking at also expanding or extending Medicaid coverage to new moms so that they can, start with a new baby with the healthcare they need so that they can get, depression, postpartum depression, or even substance use disorders or physical health issues treated early, so those kids aren't suffering the consequences of that years down the line. And I think just overall an investment in early childhood is helpful, and in the financial security of families.
And I think we're seeing the exact same thing with the kids that we work with. And in addition to the residential treatment program, one of the programs we run here in Billings is a day treatment and education program. And we're seeing more and more of those kids and their families who are homeless, who we're not only educating them and providing them with treatment, we're giving them their only shower of the day. We're sending food home with them in the evenings. And, it's been a growing trend. I think the cost of housing has contributed to that immensely.
Okay, yeah, I was about to follow up on that very topic, Mike, in terms of some of the other issues that the legislature is looking to address, like housing, lack of a very expensive housing in Montana, inflation right now. There's talk about tax cuts or tax credits. Talk a little bit about some of the other factors you're watching that are kind of the context behind why a child might not get what they need or have other issues in their life contributing to mental health or behavioral problems.
I think for a lot of the kids that we're working with, there are very few times when they can get away from the stressors and challenges. For a lot of us, when we were growing up, school may be stressful or friends may be stressful there, but you got home at night and you had an escape, whether it was your own family or friends in your neighborhood, but you could get away from that and return. Today, our kids never get away from that stress. The social media, the constant barrage of that pressure adds to that. There's a growing polarization, and the stress doesn't just happen with our kids, it's with the adults around them. And I think it feeds into a sense of hopelessness for many of our kids and a frustration. I think we as adults have to be mindful of the environment that we're creating for our kids and the way that we deal with issues and problems and disagreements. I think it's causing major amounts of stress that kids have very few ways to cope with, at least without our help, right? And so I appreciate those out there, the partners that have embraced this and said, we need to have safer places for kids, for all kids. We need to have places away from the arguments and the fights that are going on. School used to be a respite for a lot of kids, and instead it's become kind of a hot zone and argument about a lot of other things. So I appreciate those who've been working to try to cool some of those disagreements, to meet kids' needs, meet them where they are, so that they can handle being a kid is tough enough. All of these other things just make it that much tougher.
Yeah, and to add a positive twist to that, there are a lot of adverse experiences that children can experience that cause them to have stress. You know, if they're in a home that's financially insecure or experiencing violence or have parental separation, those things have big effects on kids. But we've also shown that there are positive things and supports in kids' lives that can really outweigh that. And so having supportive and safe adults is really important. Having a sense of community is really important. So, you know, anything you can do to be a positive influence in your community and with the kids that are in your life actually really means a lot to them and how they develop over time.
Dr. Wilson, talk a little bit more about pieces of legislation we're seeing or are drafted or we're expecting to see this session that will affect or seek to affect the rights of LGBTQ people. And the interesting caveat that even when that legislation runs and isn't passed or is passed and then gets held up in court, some of the ripple effects of those bills and the rhetoric that comes as we're seeing a lot more bills looking to legislate those types of rights, and how it right now seeking to affect healthcare. As a doctor, what bills are you watching and what are your concerns with that legislation?
Sure. There are a number of bills on this topic, but there's one major one that we've been reviewing recently, which is Senate Bill 99. It's a bill that really is based in a lot of misconceptions about transgender people and what healthcare for them looks like. And it's a bill that would prohibit transgender youth from receiving medical care that's recommended by major medical societies guidelines. It's really not controversial that this care is helpful. Obviously we always are looking at, how to make care better, but this is helpful evidence-based care that we provide for children who are transgender. And there's a bill that would penalize doctors, would call it unprofessional conduct to do that, and result in their license being removed for a year, which is obviously worrying to physicians and pediatricians who practice in Montana, because it puts them at a conflict of wanting to do the best thing for their patient and that family, and follow medical society guidelines, but also keep their license and be able to practice in Montana. And that's difficult. And I think a lot of people, are scared of the care, don't understand it. And that's really understandable. But I would just, emphasize that these are thoughtful decisions that are made by parents with the help and advice of a medical team, and they're not things that are taken lightly. So interfering in those decisions that parents are making for their kids is, really scary to them. And I also would like to say, for parents of transgender kids, I've heard a lot of people saying, do I need to leave the state? I want my kid to thrive. I want my kid to get health care. These bills are not constitutional. So passing bills like this that, unfairly limit healthcare to a certain population results in a court battle. They would be enjoined, they would not be in effect. So the upshot is that we're wasting our tax money trying to do things that are not going to go anywhere. But the rhetoric itself is harmful. So thank you for recognizing that.
Okay, and thank you, Dr. Wilson. And Mike's got to get on the road, so I think maybe from both of you a final thought, and then maybe plug where people can get connected with your organization if they're interested in more information.
Sure. So I think for me, a final thought is, if I can get one message across, we need to support this rate study and fully fund it for the future of our kids and our families in Montana. That it's really our number one goal. And we need to continue to focus on being kinder people and taking care of those of us around us, particularly in all of the stressors that are happening in our world today. That will make a difference as well.
I'm going to echo that and say, we show what we value by where we invest our time and our money. And I think it's really worth investing in creating healthy, positive environments for kids. And investing in the help that they might need should they encounter any issues, whether it's mental or physical health. And that's really what our organization is all about. If the American Academy of Pediatrics, our Montana chapter, has 160 pediatricians. So almost all the pediatricians in Montana are members. So if you're looking for resources on any of these topics, you can always talk to your physician. And we are at mtpeds.org.
And the Behavioral Health Alliance of Montana is our web. You can Google it. I don't remember the website, to be honest.
Your name is longer than ours.
Yeah, Sam.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. We'll link the information to get in touch with both of you or your organizations with this when the show is clipped online, so people can check that out as well. Thank you both again for being here.
Yeah, we'd love to see you back in the future. We'll be here all session. So yeah.
As will we. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
All right. Big thank you to both of them for being with us as we kind of unpack, a heavy issue, complex issue, mental health, of course, affecting a lot of different sectors, a lot of different categories.
Yes.
So, hearing that insight really important, and we appreciate them being here.
And so it's focusing on kids this week, pediatrics and youth care, when we go down the line for more mental health discussions, which we'll just continue doing because it is such a big issue in Montana. Tell us what topic you'd like to cover in that as well, and what you'd like to hear. If you have something to weigh in on in this discussion, a bill you want to flag for us, we're tracking it, but we want to hear from you too.
Okay, and with that, pivoting a little bit to another big topic, a hearing today about rules regarding how Medicaid dollars in Montana will be spent to fund abortion care. And with that, we have our political analyst for MTN, Lee Banville, joining us. Lee, thank you so much for being here.
Of course, happy to join you.
Hi, Lee. How's it going?
All right, how are you guys?
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Oh, well. So talk to us a little bit about where you feel, talk about the hearing, the issues that were discussed, and the implications of the work that was done this week and where we're going to see this issue go.
So I think it's important to understand that the abortion debate in Montana is really shaped by a couple of things. First, on the one hand, we had what's now simply called the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, which ended the national sort of constitutional protection for abortion rights in the entire United States. But here in Montana, we have a separate decision made by the Montana State Supreme Court that said that Montana has a much clearer right to privacy. And so therefore, the laws governing abortion in the state of Montana fall under the Montana state constitutional protections, which are still in place largely. And so today's debate or hearing really was focused on the question of, so we're not having what a lot of states are having, which are these sort of sweeping debates about should we allow abortion access in Montana? Can we limit it to a certain, gestational period or some other sort of cutoff? Because the constitutional right still exists here. And so what we're seeing is the debate play out in a slightly different way in Montana. And one of the ways is the way it's actually played out nationally before Dobbs, which was to say, in this example, how hard should it be for Medicaid dollars, that is federal and state sort of health insurance aimed at those at the lower end of the income scale, how hard should it be for those dollars to be used to fund abortions? And up until now, it's basically taken the doctors sending a form to Medicaid to say that this was a medically necessary abortion. I will sign off on that and it will be funded so that the patient won't have to incur an enormous amount of expenses. What's being discussed in Montana is, should Montana Medicaid dollars be used? Should it be that easy for Medicaid dollars in Montana to be used that way? And so the Department of Public Health and Human Services, DPHHS, has come up with a system that would make you submit more material to prove that it was a medically necessary abortion. And so what we heard today were people who see that as an effort to really infringe upon the rights of women to make choices about their reproductive health. And so, if you make it really hard, if you have to fill out a bunch of forms, if you have to show all these different medical records to get Medicaid to pay for the abortion, then it may make it harder for women, because women who are facing Medicaid-funded abortions tend to be those who are more at risk, more lower income. And so the concern is, if you make it really hard, if you require all these documents, it's going to infringe on what is still a constitutional right of the state of Montana to make reproductive choices.
So, Lee, I want to ask you. I know this is a state rule, not a piece of legislation, but or would be a state rule. But you know, with our decision, our 1991 Montana Supreme Court precedent, do you think this legislative session, as far as any attempts to restrict access to abortion, they're going to come in these kind of little nuanced efforts, since we have a Supreme Court decision already here, and you know, a total ban bill, it has already been, you know, we already know it's not per our Constitution. So are we going to just keep seeing nuanced moves to try to pick at reproductive rights access?
Probably. I mean, I think so. I mean, there are two ways you can address this. If you're someone who feels like abortion is murder and therefore we need to legislate it, as we need to limit it as much as we possibly can, there are essentially two avenues you have. One, well, probably three. One is to go after the constitutional amendment itself and say, yeah, we have a right to privacy in Montana, but you know, it's this one big decision called the Armstrong decision that says that privacy right equals abortion rights and access to abortion and reproductive choices. You could say, well, actually, no, let's change the Constitution to say, no, the right to privacy is about like the government not, you know, digging into my phone or not, you know, coming into my house and looking around. Like, it's not about this. You could see a constitutional amendment that seeks to do that. And that's the big move, right? You could also see, and I think what you'll more likely see are things like this Medicaid effort, which is to not go for a total ban, to not even go for like a really strict timeline ban, but rather to kind of come at it by creating sort of either paperwork or procedural sort of requirements that make it more difficult for people to pursue abortion as a choice, right? So either make it really expensive by limiting Medicaid funding, or you make it so cumbersome that therefore it impedes a woman who might be thinking about choosing an abortion or not choosing an abortion to not choose one. The third avenue may be to try and test the legal questions again through some kind of lawsuit. But I think what you're most likely going to see, because to go for the constitutional amendment is a big risk, right? I mean, we've seen in Kansas and other places, when you really make it an explicit, we don't want abortion protections in our state, that's a more unknown question. Like, we don't know how people feel about that. When you look at public opinion polls, which are kind of notoriously not great in the state of Montana, it seems like the majority of Montanans still support abortion access to some degree. And so that might not fly that well. And so I think what you'll probably see are some tactical efforts to sort of chip away at the right in different ways. And then you will, if any of them pass, you will almost assuredly see, or if this, in this case, if this rule goes into effect, you will almost assuredly see a legal fight that then lands in the courts and it will be decided there.
So in a sense, it's almost as if people who would like to ban abortion in some way are maybe testing the water a little bit with what the public in Montana will allow.
I think they're testing it in multiple ways, right? This rule is sort of one way to sort of, float the trial balloon of how much blowback are certain restrictions going to get. You'll probably see the legislature debate stuff. You'll probably see the governor sign stuff. That happened in the last session before Dobbs was the decision. And so, I would assume that there is, the abortion debate in Montana has really not been much of a debate in the last couple decades, because between the Armstrong ruling in Montana and Roe v. Wade, there were pretty clear constitutional messages, and it was really only a question of at what point does your rule infringe on my right? And that's kind of where the debate still is in Montana. And so what I think you'll see is some like if you think about Dobbs or you think about a lot of these Supreme Court decisions, they try to oftentimes tailor a case to test a very specific part of the law. You may start to see that be tested in Montana as those who oppose abortion access seek sort of, whether it's legislative, in this case it's executive, sort of administrative or judicial ways to try and sort of limit the number of abortions happening in the state.
Sorry, I keep muting and unmuting myself because I sit by a police scanner. But so there's just this, beyond abortion bills, but including them, just this expectation that kind of rose out of the last session that bills get passed, bills get signed, they get sent to the Supreme Court and challenged, they get enjoined, they get overturned over and over on a variety of topics. And the session is early on. It's only 2 weeks in, so it's hard to say, but we've seen some bills filed that already are like, there's going to be a legal note on that kind of thing. We know that goes against our Constitution. Is there a strategy to this? Is there a strategy to just sending things to the Montana Supreme Court over and over? Is it trying to get them to the U.S. Supreme Court now that bench looks a little different?
I think what's interesting is, if you want to get the U.S. Supreme Court to tell us that the Montana right to privacy doesn't cover abortions, that is pretty active by the Supreme Court, right? That is like essentially saying, no, Montana misread its own constitution, which seems not like, I think if there's any, first of all, I have no idea. No one's calling me with their strategy about how to end abortion access in Montana.
What? Why not? I know. Well, maybe now they will.
Posted, they could call me. But I think what we're seeing is, the debate in Montana is more complicated than it is in states where they don't have an explicit right to privacy. Right, where in a lot of ways the abortion debate in Montana was actually more further down the road, that's not English, but it was further down the road when Roe v. Wade came down than it is in a lot of states. A lot of states had, 46 states had abortion limitations when Roe v. Wade came down. And so what we see is, I think, a lot of states just stopped talking about it because it's like, oh, it's a constitutional right, we're not going to deal with it. And so when it was overturned, it went right back to where it was in like the 60s, 70s, sometimes the 50s, sometimes the 1870s, when the last time the state had really dealt with this question. What happened in Montana is in 72, we get a constitution that explicitly says we have a constitutional right to privacy. And then we get a decision in the 90s that says, yep, that means that covers abortion. And so in that way, actually, our conversation at the state level is much more sort of further down the legal road than a lot of these other states were when Roe was overturned. And so really in Montana, those who oppose abortion access are sort of seeking what is their best method to kind of get what is happening in other states to happen here, because it's not going to happen through the legislature unless the legislature passes a law that doesn't run counter to this 1993 Supreme Court decision. And so they really are trying to I think it's going to be a lot of trial and error. I think you're going to see a lot of cases go to courts, and I think you're going to see the courts say, look, we have a thing that says this is what it is, until, maybe they find a way. What's interesting is that the Supreme Court before Dobbs, we saw some cases that really made it not about abortion access, but about freedom of speech. Like, can we protest at abortion clinics? Can we sort of protest to stop people from seeking abortions? And when it became a free speech issue, then you saw your right to access of abortion or your right to speak. And they were able to do some pretty effective chipping away at rules that protected women's access to abortion clinics. And so we might start to see stuff like that here, because I think, because that constitutional right's still there, that's hard to overcome, but you can come at other elements of how can I make it more difficult for people to seek an abortion because I really am morally opposed to abortion? I might choose to go after something different than the actual abortion access itself.
talk a little bit about what you think the makeup of the GOP in Montana means in terms of what we might be able to anticipate from lawmakers seeking to pursue some of these avenues to restrict abortion access. So I spoke with Senator Barry Usher. He's a Billings senator about his, he joined the newly formed Freedom Caucus. And we had a good conversation about kind of what he thought set that group apart. And one of their issues, or one of their, he said, it's not in writing, but this is a pretty, our moral baseline is a Christian moral baseline. And so it's pro-life is one of their pillars. So talk a little bit about the emergence of this group and what that means for, does that mean that there is like a growing, maybe a little bit more hard right presence in the GOP in Montana, and how effective might they be?
That is a really good question that I can kind of try to answer. I think we don't know yet is the cop-out answer. I'm not gonna lie, but I think it's important to understand that I think that a lot of people who are like worried about the Montana GOP supermajority see the GOP as it's one party, it's one group, they believe one thing. And I think the reality is more complicated than that. We don't know for sure, right? Yes, the Freedom Caucus has formed in Montana. It's formed in, I think, like 7 other states. And obviously it's having huge sway up on Capitol Hill in the United States, or in Washington, D.C. It's kind of unknown right now because, like, on the one hand, you see the Freedom Caucus form. On the other hand, you see Republicans back the ability to get things out of committee and right onto the floor more easily, which could be seen as a way for moderate Republicans to work with Democrats to do stuff. And so, I think what's unclear to me sitting here right now is there a unified Republican majority around the question of abortion? And I'm not saying there's not, I just don't know if there is, because within the Republican Party, there's always been a really strong libertarian streak. And libertarians are often like, I don't want the government messing with anything. I don't want them in the economy. I don't want them in my bedroom. I don't want them regulating my drugs. Like, I don't want them touching my guns. Like, that's a whole branch of conservatism, which is hard to say, apparently, that is more limited government. And so absolutely, the Republicans could have a strong pro-life or anti-abortion access, whatever you want to call it, majority. But there's a possibility that there might be within that a branch of people who are like, I just don't know if we should be legislating into the bedroom or into the doctor's office. And when we saw the legislative referendum go down 131 over the election, where it was a question of should the government be involved in these like medical decisions about children who might have been born as a part of a failed abortion, or should they receive medical attention? It was the Born Alive Act. It lost, right? Even though Republicans did quite well statewide. And so I think there's still an unclear sort of path forward for how far, being pro-abortion access doesn't necessarily mean you want abortion all the time on demand and for free. So I think that there's probably a line in here for both Republicans and probably Democrats that say, there is a point where I'm not going to support this. And there's also a point where I'm not going to oppose access to this. And so I think what we're still finding, and it will be interesting to see, is where does that line exist for the majority of the Republican Party? Because it might not be as far over as Barry Usher and the Freedom Caucus would like it to be.
Oh. And do you ever think this is going to be one of those topics that kind of loses steam politically in Montana, in the country? How long will it be?
So I was born the day after Roe v. Wade was handed down. And I don't know if you can see, but it's pretty gray. And I'm kind of old. And it is still as heated a debate today as it was in the 60s and 70s. And so I think it's one of these issues that is so, even though I think a lot of people have more nuanced positions than we like to talk about, like I think a lot of people who are pro-abortion access do have a personal line where they're like, I'm not comfortable with this now. I'm not comfortable with an abortion this late or this type of abortion, and vice versa. I think there are people who are strongly anti-abortion who are like, except there are times where I'm not. And so I think that even though there is that reality, the debate itself is so polarized that I think that it's unlikely that those who really oppose abortion, it's not like a political opportunistic move, right? They're not doing it because they think it's going to get them votes. I don't think. I think it's a deeply morally held position, just like those who believe abortion access is important and bodily autonomy is a thing that should exist, feel very passionately that should be the case. I think it's one of these things that the debate will never be over, because even if you passed a law that made it illegal, that's not going to make it go away, and it's not going to end the debate about healthcare choices and what's the proper role of government in them. And similarly, like we had when we had a constitutional right to abortion access, that did not end the debate about how we regulate and how we allow abortions in the country, let alone in Montana. So yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere. What we really don't know, and is kind of, and as a political analyst, which is twisted, I probably shouldn't say this, but it's fascinating to watch, is how does this issue continue to play out? Like, does it continue to drive people to the polls? Because like this issue might be for the Democrats in Montana almost equivalent to gun rights for conservatives, where it's like it's one of these things that's going to become an issue that is like a lightning rod, and if you are not pro-choice or pro-abortion access, I'm not going to vote for you, even if I agree with everything else. And it'll be interesting, or it might end up being more like most issues where you're like, I don't really like them on this, but they do this, this, and this, so I'm going to still vote for them. That's what we don't know. Is it that divisive an issue that if you're if you're a pro-abortion access voter, will you not vote for someone if they're anti-abortion access? If that becomes the thing, then it becomes like the Second Amendment does.
Okay. Lee, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your time and your insights. What are you looking at for next week? It's been a little bit of a slow start we've been talking about, but issues are heating up. More's going on.
I mean, we've said it the last couple of times we've been on. The first couple of weeks have been a little slow. There've been a lot of bills, but there are a lot of smaller bills and bills that came through with bipartisan support. We've seen a lot of things up on the House floor or the Senate floor pass almost unanimously these first couple of weeks. But I think, next week things are going to start getting a little busier. Next week, for example, some of the big tax bills that the governor has been backing are going to have their first hearings. A bill to lower the income tax bracket for the highest tax bracket that most Montanans pay, and also making some expansion to the earned income tax credit. That's one of Governor Gianforte's big priority bills, and also a bill to exempt much more businesses pay a business equipment tax on some equipment they have up to $300,000 now, and the governor wants to see that raised to $1 million, which would mean thousands more, many more businesses in this state wouldn't have to pay any business equipment tax. So both of those, I believe, are scheduled for hearings next week, and so we're going to start to see some of, as I say, those governor's proposals. He's talked a lot about tax relief as one of his main goals for the session, and we'll start to see those appearing. Also, the budget committees are starting to get a little more deep into their work, talking to agencies and starting to look at agency budgets. The budget is such a big part of the state legislative process that they have separate committees to do it, and they have subcommittees to break down the big parts of the budget, the healthcare budget and the education budget and some of those things. And so the subcommittees do a lot of their work in the first month or two before the full budget gets put together. And so they've been in meetings this week and starting next week as well. And hasten to point out that as you were just having a discussion about abortion, some of the first abortion bills are starting to appear. There's going to be one next week debated potentially about the constitutional right to privacy and its applicability to abortion. So I would imagine that may be a notable hearing as well. And I would also say that a bill that I know that you guys have been watching regarding missing and murdered Indigenous people task force of that's was supposed to have a hearing already, but it looks like that may come next week as well. So we're starting to see things become a little more busy up here at the Capitol, and I think they're going to start to get a little more heated perhaps, but certainly a busier couple of weeks coming.